We'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly's Rules Committee to order. Today is July 13th, and it is a few minutes after 1. We'll go ahead and start with introductions, starting with Mr. Perez-Rodillo.
Cameron Perez-Rodillo.
Zach Johnson.
Karen Bromville.
Scott Myers.
May Zalatel.
Kevin Cross.
Claire Ross, Assembly Staff.
Allie Hartman, Assembly Staff.
And the Clerk's Office.
Jamie Hines, Municipal Clerk.
Great. And on the phone, Mr. Rivera.
Diaz Rivera.
Great. Oh, yes. I've already slipped. Rules Committee, first names, please. All right. Anyone else on the phone?
Yes, this is Dee Ennis.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us, Dee. All right, so turning to the agenda, Above and Beyond Award, there isn't one this month, but if you think there's an exceptional community member in your district and you would like to learn more about that, talk with the Ombudsman Daryl. You can get all the good details there. So Legislative Employee of the Quarter, I'm gonna turn it over to the clerk, Ms. Hines. Or Amy, sorry.
Thank you. So our legislative employee of the quarter has not only been recognized by other departments as being super great at their job, setting up processes and flowcharts and keeping everything organized. They've also been recognized by other industry agencies. Most recently, this person has done a tremendous job with the alcohol ordinance and what will be going forward very soon with more alcohol ordinances. And so without further ado, our employee of the quarter is Mandy Honest.
Government fashion, you have to assemble your own trophy and stay caffeinated.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Can I get a picture? Yeah. Great. I'm gonna take a couple here. Let's get it nice and close. Good. Beautiful, beautiful. Beautiful. Great. Congrats, Mandy. Well deserved.
We're going to do it in the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Very well deserved. So I have a couple of things for the chair's report. Want to note that Ms. Anna and Chris are both excused, and we have George Martinez with us. So looking for a couple of volunteers, if there's any interest. The Youth Employment and Parks is looking for an assembly member to have a youth do a job shadow on August 8th from 9 to noon. If you'd be interested in doing that, I've done it before, it's great. They literally just shadow you for that portion of the day. Reach out to Beth Nordland. She needs one assembly member. So if there's a volunteer for that, that would be wonderful. Also, the next conversation with the Alaska Block Caucus is on September 17th. The chair has agreed to attend, but we would like to solidify a couple of other members if they're planning to attend, just to go ahead and confirm their attendance. So if you're planning to attend, if you can let Allie know, we will make sure we let the Alaska Block Caucus know to expect you. We also wanted to let you know that just before the meeting, you all should have received in your email the Golden Lion lease and user agreement. It just came in. All right, a couple other quick things. The Assembly has empowered the Associate Ombudsman to conduct outreach at the direction of the Assembly to seek the broadest possible recruitment for applicants for the Youth Assembly representative, and has done a really admirable job. In addition, the clerk's office and legislative staff are working on a youth engagement page on the Assembly web pages, which will include information about the Assembly youth representative role and application process. This last recruitment effort was very successful in 2023. And we intend to do so again in 2024, and basically just watch this evolve through the addition of the youth engagement page. And so we're really excited to continue to flesh out that, not only that role, but turn it into basically a full youth engagement effort beyond just participation at the meeting. That is all I have for notes from the chair. Oh, one last thing. Tuesday night, great debate. We had some good debate Tuesday night. Just a gentle reminder that even though debate may get heated, let's try to just leave it up there on the dais, and we all have a lot of work to do together. And, check in with each other if something went sideways, but it's taken some of us members a long time to realize that, so to continue to make that reminder, especially when we have contentious topics, I think it's important. We just spend a lot of time together, so it's just really important. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire.
All right, for the legislative services report, you heard about the youth engagement page that Allie's working on. Thank you to everyone who came and passed out donuts to staff on Juneteenth. That was super fun. Allie has launched the Thinkerage page, which she's going to pull up in a little bit and show you some social media that the Assembly is doing to spread some goodwill in the community. And I'll just keep talking, and then while you get that ready, Allie, you can put it up. Jennifer has been working with Anna and Chris with the legislative committee to get prepared for, it's already time to prepare for the next session. So we'll be getting the briefing from the lobbyists on July 27th, and Jennifer has asked her to flag budget items that are related to Anchorage so we can see how we did last year in the last session, and then plan for the session ahead. They've also flagged some bills that were introduced which may align with Assembly priorities or related to Anchorage issues. And then we're preparing for the 24th session, so I think you all got the email to start considering in your committees if there are things that you're working on in the committee that need to rise up to the level of going to the legislature next session. Last year, a couple issues got passed as resolutions in the summer and fall, and then that made it really easy to put it into the legislative program because you had all agreed on them and we just dropped them right in. So if you have ideas to do resolutions, I think that now is the time to be thinking about that. And then we're also looking to have some opportunities for the Assembly to connect with the Anchorage Caucus this summer and fall before they head back to Juneau. We have been working on the Housing Summit. We're looking at late October for that as the follow-up. This will be the large public gathering to follow up on the retreat that happened this spring. And we also might, there was some interest in affinity groups around some of the topics that came out of the retreat as a way to, a lot of the people, the survey that was done afterwards, a lot of the community members attended, expressed that they'd love to stay involved and help out and volunteer their efforts. So we're looking at ways to keep them engaged until leading up to the summit this fall. There's a task force, as you recall, there was one on sanctioned camping, and there's also a task force on complex behavioral health needs. And that group issued a report that was before they issued their first draft of the report a couple of Assembly meetings ago. And they decided they wanted to host a leadership summit of some of the state and city leaders around that topic to be able to present the barriers they've discovered and ask the leaders around that issue to come together and have some solutions. And so we are looking at August 28th or 29th for that, and Assembly members will be invited, so we'll keep you in the loop on that. You, through the alcohol tax, funded a strategic plan to figure out how to fund the alcohol, like how it should be allocated and that sort of thing in the future. So we have an RFP out on the street that closes yesterday, so hopefully we've got some applicants for that. And we will be looking at those and selecting a firm to do the strategic plan this fall through next spring. Administratively, we are working on our own strategic plan as legislative services, and so we'll be able to present to you so you'll have a better understanding of what we do and what you can ask us for. And then I also wanted to offer, I'll be sending out an email shortly on this. For those of you who have AIDS, if you would like, we could host a get-together for the AIDS so they can meet each other and trade ideas for how they work together. I know some of you are in the process of probably about to start, so we might wait until you get yours on board if any of the new members are going to be hiring aides. I'll be sending out an email on that soon. Finally, AEDC is hosting one of their big luncheons on August 2nd, and I need to take an RSVP list for who's going to sit at the assembly table, so I'll send an email about that. Let me know if you want to sit at the table.
Was that?
What? August 2nd. And that is all that we have for our report.
Any questions for Claire and Legislative Services? Karen?
Actually, this was more to you. Was the day of the shadow for the YEP kit on the 8th?
It's August 2nd,
August 2nd.
from
There you go.
9 to noon.
We can bring them to the luncheon.
So we were just going to lunch all the time. That's all.
Actually, they have a big luncheon that day,
Oh,
so they can work and then have to miss the lunch. I mean, they can choose lunch. City offered a lot of lunch that day, so.
I'm bringing Tupperware.
Anyone else for Legislative Services? All right, well, turn it over to the clerk.
Thank you through the chair. So, staffing and recruiting is the name of the game in the clerk's office.
Change out your mic, it's really garbly.
Oh, you got hot
Yeah, we got extras in this way.
This one looks fresh. I'll take the other one.
Is that better? Yeah. So staffing and recruiting is the name of the game in the clerk's office. We are, I just filled up your inbox with some changes that have been made, some hirings that have been made. And we have 3 job postings that will be out on the street this week. So hopefully within the next several weeks, we'll be getting those 3 positions recruited and filled. And we'll be getting the new staff trained, and the current staff is keeping everything afloat at this point. So that's my report for today.
Great, any questions for the clerk? All right, thank you, thanks for those efforts, and congratulations for everyone who got promotions, and I love to see that in our office mobility, it's awesome. All right, moving on to unfinished business, we've tabled the BSA funding. Is there any update on the working group to address dangerous street crossings? It's usually headed up by Daniel and Kevin, and is there any update?
Sorry. I don't have a whole lot, not a lot has progressed since the last time. It went back through traffic, and we've been in conversations about identifying those areas that offer the greatest opportunity, but at the same time, what is the affordability of some of these traffic improvements? So we've narrowed it down, we narrowed our scope down to what we call the specific hot spots and hot zones, and now the next thing is just saying, okay, well, now that we've come up with a best practices concept, they're still working through that. What is the cost and expense of implementing something like that? Because anytime you add a regulatory concern, you add expense onto it. And we have some unique characteristics regarding our traffic up here. You realize if you do if you put in a raised sidewalk area, we have considerably high levels of groundwater, lots of drainage, and how does that affect stormwater runoff? What additionally, it may sound easy just to come in and carve up and create a level field, but then what does that do to your gray water? If you have to then go in and tie into, into water runoff, or you have to tie into drainage, there's a considerable cost included. And so, but then if you then just drop off at the curb, do you create a nuisance area, or what does that look like? So we're kind of, now that we've identified best practices that have been utilized in other areas, now if we were to implement them here locally, are we solving the problem or creating new ones? And that's going through the traffic study. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, yeah, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for the update there, Kevin. I just out of curiosity on your sort of list of, I guess, high-risk areas. Does that include the Rock Ridge Road crossing down off of O'Malley?
I know that there were some areas around 100th and near Mears Middle School. I do know that Yesco Valley was on that list. I'm trying to remember, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't have the list in front of me, but we narrowed it down to about 5. And so you realize that there's problems everywhere, but the difference is there a problem or is there an inconvenience? And it is identifying those top priority areas that you could see realistic. But yes, O'Malley Road and Victor and 100th, and I want to say, I'm trying to remember what the other one was. It might have been around Mount View Elementary or something like that, but I can get you that list.
Thanks, and I would just kind of flag that one because conditions have or are changing. There will be O'Malley Road improvements, they're adding bicycle access, so the concern is with that bike path there, more kids will be inclined to walk or bike to school. There's no safe way for them to get across O'Malley Road from the neighborhoods to where the schools are. So it's kind of it's changing conditions down there. I guess to some extent we'll see how many kids utilize it, but certainly we're worried that there will be a fair number, and it's a 50-mile-an-hour road.
To the chair, if I may respond. Part of the difficulty you run into is that we've all run into this, the difference between municipally maintained roads and state-owned roads. And so, although we may have some magnificent thoughts in mind about what works here locally, whenever we're working with DOT and we're working with the state, then different authorities take place. And so working within those confines continues to prove to be an interesting challenge.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Zach. And actually, once we get the list, if there are particular crossings identified that are state roads, it may be worthwhile to raise those at AMAX and see if they happen to coincide with any AMAX projects, either now or in the pipeline moving forward as part of the multimodal improvements. All right, any other questions on school crossings? All right. I don't have an update, I don't know if anyone else does, on the school board assembly working group to address youth involvement.
No.
Okay, no. All right, I think we talked a little bit about what we're working on. We can make sure we follow up on that for the next rules committee meeting. And then, so next is Daryl with an update on community council boundary changes.
Thank you, Meg. The Community Council's Boundary Advisory Committee held their 5th meeting last month in June, and there'll be one more meeting of the committee on Teams to approve some minutes from some of the previous meetings and just reaffirm the recommendations. But the committee has completed its work. It was anticipated originally to be 2 meetings. It ended up being 5. It was some pretty robust discussion. There was great participation from different councils and members of the community. And in the end, the committee is going to be recommending, I think, about 6 minor boundary changes, pretty minimal. The most contentious issue was left for the last meeting, and that was in East Anchorage. And some people have been are of the opinion that the Northeast Community Council area is too large and there needs to be another council carved out. But when the committee looked at this, it's the cart before the horse, situation, because the committee decided it wasn't going to recommend that the Assembly establish a new community council district, because the way it works is members of the community, constituents, are supposed to petition the Assembly to establish a community council. So those individuals who have voiced concerns about the size of the Northeast Community Council need to hold the required public meetings, draft bylaws, and petition the Assembly to establish a new community council, rather than the Assembly establishing the district and hoping a group comes forward to petition to be recognized. So as soon as the committee holds its final meeting and reaffirms their recommendations, I will provide that information to the members of the Assembly so they can see what the recommendations are. The recommendations will not be going to P&Z probably till October or November, late October or November, because many councils don't meet during the summer, and planning staff and the committee wanted to give the councils time to review the recommendations in September and October and comment before they go to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Great, any questions? That's a great update, especially as we get ready to head back into community councils in September. I think they'll be wanting to know what's going on. Yeah, Karen.
So the deal with Northeast Community Council, I thought they were looking at, perhaps just moving the boundaries, so some of them were in Russian Jacks or, so that wouldn't be forming a new council. So you're saying they would rather form a new council than go into one of those smaller councils next door?
So if I remember off the top of my head, there were a couple of minor changes that were recommended for council boundaries in East Anchorage, but nothing major. They considered should Nunaka Valley area be a separate community council. There's been a lot of discussion from different members of the community, but it's really up to the members of the community if they want to form. There was a lot of discussion about a new community council, not just shifting the boundaries. There, part of it was, one consideration was to move the boundaries for Russian Jack further east, and in the end, the committee didn't recommend that. There was some opposition from members of the community to that.
All right, great. Any other questions? All right, thanks for the update, Daryl. All right, under new business, there's a missing item, so we're gonna turn to the ethics disclosure. Dee is on the phone with us, and then we're gonna insert, after that, Felix has a brief update for us on some homelessness initiatives, and then we'll move on with updates on work by members, and then the CIP conversation. So Dee, we have, just so you're aware, since you're on the phone, a couple of handouts here. One is the disclosure of economic interest form, and the other is notice of intent to respond to public solicitation. And I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. We'll get to those in a second. Not sure who had the idea for this workshop, but I think it was intended that members could bring up ethics questions. But one of the things I thought would be very helpful is to pass on different questions that have come from members to me if the answers were particularly helpful to the body. And then to open it up for members, and especially given a somewhat interesting assembly meeting with conflict issues, whether people want to look at any of that. But let's start with the simple part first. Kevin brought up to me a very interesting question which involves these forms. And he disclosed to me, he said, okay, now what do? I'm a one-third owner in a business, in an LLC. They have a third-party manager. And Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that too much correction will be that helpful. But he's a one-third owner, equity partner, doesn't manage, he doesn't solicit business, and they're a laundry business. And so the question came up, they're looking for more business. If they want to try to solicit laundry service from the Golden Lion, what disclosure issues might come up? So a number of things sort of arose. Number one, there is a code section which corresponds to that form, the notice of intent to respond. And I can put this in an email to you later, but for those who are interested, it's 1.15.100. And it's interest in municipal contract or business with municipality. When you first came on, you were supposed to fill out the other form you have in front of you, the disclosure form, and that's the form that just says, I, a member of my household, family member of business, have these current contracts with the municipality. That form goes to the ethics board to see if they have any questions. So that's theoretically people do right when they come on. But now here's the new thing. Kevin's business now is interested in potential business with the city. And so this form comes on, and this form says, hey, you need to fill this form out 7 days before you respond to the solicitation. So a bid goes out before 7 days before the deadline, the deadline for that solicitation, you need to file this form. You file it, interestingly enough, with purchasing and the clerk's office. The clerk's office then sends it to the ethics board. And then if they have questions. So one thing, we'll talk to Kevin, fill out this form, it'll get shot over to the ethics board. Kevin, I think, was interested in what about a request for an advisory opinion, or the clerk's office that suggests that. Right now, those, they take so long. That one thing nice about this form, which I thought about after the fact, is it goes right to the ethics board. And then are they able to take it up? But it's a good lesson for everybody in the room that you do need to fill out these forms and be aware of them. The interesting thing in Kevin's case is we don't know if the solicitation is going to be from the operator or from from purchasing. And I'm thinking if it's from the operator, it may or may not come under this. Don't know. I haven't seen that lease agreement or the use agreement, because you'd also look in there to see what are the procurement requirements. So it's a little bit complicated, but good to remember that you're supposed to be filing that form and to keep that in mind. And I don't know if, and by the way, the other thing that brought up with the ethics board for me is I have a letter about to go to Becky, and I have a call into their attorney, Paul, and to say, hey, is there a way that we could have, say, 15 minutes, a standing 15 minutes for assembly questions at every ethics board meeting? The requests for opinions are not timely because they have lots of them and they're very important issues often. You need this type of stuff handled very quickly. And I will say, I have a well-reasoned plethora of opinions on all of this. My opinion is worth squat. You need to hear from the ethics board if you want cover. And they will come up with helpful parameters. So anyway, I have a sort of my thinking is let's get a way to get before the ethics board. Jennifer has explained to me, and Paul said at a former work session, please don't be dropping. Those are not helpful. That is how we used to handle it in the past before so much more stuff was becoming for the ethics board. Chris would regularly stop by, or you could talk to an ethics officer, or but sort of we're trying to formalize a procedure to sort of expedite some of the assembly requests. They wouldn't give you a formal answer, but they said, yeah, here are the 5 things you should think about. So I think that's what will happen with Kevin. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions on this particular form, notice of intent to respond to solicitation? So if anybody in your family wants to get, wants to do business with the city, and by the way, that includes the school district, they need to fill out this form.
Thanks, Dee. I would just say that even if you start your job as an assembly member and you didn't have anything to disclose, but you later have something to disclose, it's incumbent upon you to go ahead and get this form filled out. I filled it out. The ethics board reviews it. I went and answered a few of their questions, and that was that. Real simple. Not hard to do. Yeah, Cameron.
Yeah, so I have a question, and maybe this is I think I likely just need to go and submitting a question to the ethics board. I have not gone before the board yet, but do you submit a question and then they decide whether you need to meet with them or not, or do you just go and meet with them and ask that question? I'm not sure how that works, and I guess one of the things that's on my mind, and maybe you could just answer it right now, it'd be really easy, is it because I'm assuming. So I run a non-profit organization, and I'm assuming that my organization should not apply for the mayor's grant. I've never applied for it, never had any of my programs apply for it in the 4 years I've been on the assembly, because I always assumed that was a conflict, and thought that funding coming from the mayor's office to the nonprofit that I run would be a conflict of interest. But I've never asked. So anyway. So that's just something that's on my mind, but go ahead and answer those if you can.
Okay, two parts to that question. One is if to get something before the board, in the past, you had to file a request for advisory opinion, otherwise they don't know what to do with it. And that's a nice little form, it's on the internet. And by the way, 5 ethics forms. You go to assembly, then you go to their boards and commissions, then you go to the ethics board, and on that are forms. And so the request for advisory opinion, which I think now is interactive, just that you can put your question on that and you can decide whether it's confidential or not. The problem there is how quickly will it come up, although yours doesn't have immediacy as much, I don't think, Cameron, because you've taken the position for years. The second part, though, what's the answer to that question? Interestingly enough, that interest in municipal contract started out from the old code, very clear, you may not acquire interest in municipal business. However, the but is rather large, except if you do not affect the request for services or the award, execution, or administration of the grant, contract, or lease. That's an interesting one, Cameron, in your case, because the mayor is who runs that program, who does the selection. You as an assembly member are not involved in the selection or the administration of that grant. So just the plain reading of that code section, you seem fine. But I think that's a great one to bring before that, as a request for opinion. When you all want to do that, don't hesitate to come to me because I help you write them and I reference the proper code section. You don't have to have that, but it really expedites things if it's sort of submitted in an efficient way. So I think that's a great question to ask them, even though under the plain reading of this code, you as an assembly member would not be selecting or administering that grant.
Thanks.
Next thing I think really is just, do any of you have, and by the way, back to Kevin's, the sort of the unique thing about Kevin is that you all have lots to do with the issues that come up about the operator at the Golden Lion. Is the contract between the operator and the business, Kevin's business, or is it a purchasing procurement? I think obviously there's a purchasing procurement, there has to be a disclosure element to that. But if it's actually between the operator and a business, but because you all have so much involvement with that particular relationship, then maybe disclosure is important. But again, that would be an interesting one for going before the board. Sometimes these issues are too complex for the Board of Ethics, and I say that in all good faith, that it's tough for them to understand the relationship. It doesn't mean you're having a hard time understanding the relationship between Golden Lion and the operator and how they're going to be handling it. But we will try to figure out a way to simplify that for them or give them some more historical information. And one of the things, by the way, that comes out is both with Kevin and then also with Anna. Anna had a lot of involvement with an entity that had business with the administration, is that what you're looking for is guidance. Can I do this in the future? The Ethics Board is trying to stay away from hypotheticals or what if. So Kevin's, well, what if my company, responds to solicitation? I think that because you have to have official action, but that official action is sort of imminent, right? So that maybe there's enough to go forward at this point, but we have to be careful about what ifs. They have plenty of other work to do. So,
Thanks,
any questions at this
Yeah,
point?
we have a couple. I have one, particularly in Kevin's situation, and maybe a what if, or maybe not a what if, but I feel like it's a bit of a timing sequence because it would be, for me, the question is whether or not Kevin or Kevin's business had any conversation with the potential operator before the grant agreement or agreement to have that operator comes before us. Because if there's a potential, like if you're already engaged in a conversation about a potential business arrangement before we've selected the operator through the grant agreement, then I think you at least have to disclose that because you're starting to get a potential interest in that entity getting the contract or getting the agreement because you started to go down that road versus just waiting to see if there's a solicitation later after the operator has been selected. Does that make sense?
Well, I agree with your instinct there, Meg, but I'm not sure what that disclosure would look like. I have a one-third interest in the business. I'm not involved in management. But we have started talking to the operator about potential business down the line. And of course, the company then needs to know what's the relationship of the operator to the solicitation. So it's, again, very difficult. I'm not sure off the top of my mind. Disclosure is always better.
Yeah.
And by the way, one thing I'm going to say to this whole group is you know, we've had conflicts of interest forever, but they are ever so much more complicated now than they were in the past. In the past, you had, you know, a handful of assembly people, had one or two interests in business. They weren't involved in so many community activities that you know, are having more and more active assembly members. The conflicts are getting tougher. It's not simply, you know, Mayor Sullivan owned the restaurant behind the city hall, and what happens when the assessment goes up. That's about as complicated as most of the conflicts were up to the last 5-8 years. And now they're ever so much more complicated because most of you, or many of you, are involved in the nonprofit world. The work of those entities intersect with your work as the assembly member. So there's really good reason why there is so much more conflict analysis right now, because you are very involved individuals in the community.
Thanks, Steve. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this conversation because I find a lot of us on, you know, if you've been in this town long enough, you either have a business or you have something going on, you're investing in the community in one form or another. And there's a difference between investment interest and in a conflict of interest, right? So like my business, Quantum Laundry, again, I don't run the sales department, nothing, but what came to me was like, hey, you know, it would be irresponsible for our sales team not to try to bid on some of these contracts. So I just filled out the form and said, I don't know if they are. I've asked them to tell me if they are. And can I preemptively let people know? And how do I communicate that? If something comes through the purchasing website and they say they're bidding on this, I would expect a responsible sales team that provides commercial laundry services to try. I mean, that's what they're in the business of doing. But at the same time, how do I quickly make sure? So I was trying to file ahead of time and say, if you see something like, then how do I make sure? And then also notify the sales team, hey, if you see this, you got to let me know so that because I don't babysit you. So it's kind of an interesting little concept, being an equity investor in a company, but not running it, but understanding that there's a potential conflict there. So, and the other thing was I found the ethics department to be so fantastic because I own a lot of different businesses, and Scott, does having a real estate license procure you from working on real estate needs, in Anchorage? Does owning a house eliminates you from wanting lower property taxes? And so there's a difference between a general interest and a special interest, and I found our ethics team to be fantastic at helping you get to the meat of those issues. And if you ever have the slightest question, just pick them up. Dee's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thanks, Steve.
Okay, and then I didn't know if you wanted to open it up for other questions or those I think it can be difficult, but given the cultural interplay at the last assembly meeting, whether you wanted to go any further with that.
I think everyone's getting pulled a little bit by the sunshine and it's keeping their mouths shut. So, but thanks for being on with us, and we always know where to find you. We appreciate the expertise.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to Felix. We're pulling up your PowerPoint now, but if you want to go ahead and get us set up and then just let us know when to advance the slides. Here we go.
Great, wonderful. Hopefully you all have the right version. Jamie, I emailed you an updated version right as the meeting will start. Perfect. All right, so this presentation, I'm going to go through this very quickly. Usually it takes me like a good 15, 20 minutes to go through this entire presentation, but I'm going to go through it in like 6 or 7 minutes here. And this is really just to do a precursor for when we eventually have the work session on funding for our various homelessness efforts so that folks get a picture of what that means. And I'll talk a little bit about the work session tomorrow that's currently planned. Okay, so next slide, please. So basically what this presentation was, it was a presentation that I gave to a couple of different groups in June, the Homelessness Leadership Council and then the Homelessness Prevention Response System Advisory Council. I gave this presentation in June, so it's a little bit outdated, but these are the different topics that I talked about. Next slide, please. I talked about the Sanctioned Camp Community Task Force, now called the Allowed Camp Community Task Force, and some of the work that they were doing. And you all know that we got their report earlier this week, and hopefully folks will soon have a chance to review that. Next slide, please. And you actually heard a little bit about this earlier. I think Claire was talking about it. The Complex Behavioral Health Needs Community Task Force also released a report and back in June, and they are also working toward the Behavioral Health Summit in August. Next slide, please. Then we all know about the pilot allowed sites, which the Assembly approved on Tuesday, and the progress that's happening there. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the Clean Slate strategy and the work to select permanent year-round low barrier shelter. Next slide, please. All aspects of the work, so all the slides prior to this and all the slides really after this, are going to need some type of funding, whether it's capital funding or operational funding. So both Anna Brawley and I have had a series of meetings over the last several weeks where we've been talking with and meeting with key leaders in a variety of different groups, whether that's meeting internally with municipal departments. So we met with OMB, we met with the health department, and the division that manages our federal funds within the health department. We met with some state of Alaska leaders, some philanthropy leaders, some business leaders, just to get a sense of really what does our funding landscape possibly look like. And that is really the focus of the work session that is currently scheduled for tomorrow. Again, I'll talk about that at the end. And then, of course, we know that we have a bunch of housing coming online, and housing is the solution to homelessness, as is often repeated, right? And sorry, I didn't say next slide, please. One of the things that we're really trying to work is eliminate barriers to utilizing all of those units coming online, so that we don't have units sitting empty. That is not something that we want. So that's another part of the work going on. Of course, we have an emergency cold weather shelter plan. And so looking forward to continuing that discussion at the committee next week. Next slide, please. The Forest Park Mobile Home Park issue is an ongoing issue, and Kim Cross and I got an update on that earlier this week, and I think at some point there'll probably be a broader update shared with the full assembly. Next slide, please. You all have seen a lot about being handed a third inning in the news, seeing what we can do to really possibly demobilize this camp, or at least try to do what we can to mitigate negative impacts, and that's on everyone's minds of how we can help with that. Next slide, please. And of course, we know the housing retreat happened in May, and then the housing summit is going to be happening sometime in October, and a lot of different great work happening in that arena. These last few slides, I'm not going to go through them, but they all basically talk about the full picture of what, actually, I'm going to do this because it might be helpful for folks. So next slide, please. So, I am not shy of saying that we are in crisis and that we need help from the state of Alaska and from HUD. I'm very thankful for Chair Constance's leadership, Chris's leadership, trying to get funding from HUD, and then we're all working to see what we can get from the state, right? Next slide, please. The bigger picture that connects really all of this, next slide, please. Our overarching strategy is a housing first approach. We are a housing first municipality. We've adopted that as an assembly. We all say that pretty much. Next slide, please. And we're really focused on working with our partners to implement the Anchored Home Plan. Next slide, please. And addressing our emergency needs. And I know it feels like all we talk about is emergency needs, but there's so much more work going on beyond our emergency needs. Next slide, please. We're also taking a holistic approach to our work to ensure long-term housing stability and success. And that's one of the key factors for me is once we get people into housing, how stable can they become in housing? How successful are we in keeping people in housing? That's a huge factor I think that we all need to be taking about. Next slide, please. All of the lanes of the work that are in this slideshow really help us to achieve the vision of functional zero in the end. Next slide, please. So that was the presentation. I'm going to go really back to slide, the funding work group slide 7. So basically, what I am waiting for right now, which is why the work session tomorrow might be rescheduled to a future date, is I am waiting for really half this picture that you see on this slide. OMB is putting together a memo that's really going to talk about what's really left in our alcohol tax fund balance, what's really left in our general government fund balance, and what kind of budget cuts, what would that look like? Or what would it look like if we did a sweep of all of the positions that are currently not filled, all those kinds of scenarios, right? And I'm waiting for that memo to be put together by OMB, but it isn't done yet. And so I don't want us to have a funding discussion until we have a full picture. And right now, without that memo, we're only going to be able to have half a discussion tomorrow. So I'm going to wait a few more hours to see if OMB maybe has an update for me on that memo. But if not, you're likely going to see that work session tomorrow be rescheduled. Because again, I don't want us to have a half discussion. I want us to have a full discussion tomorrow. That's it from me. Thanks, Meg.
Thanks, Felix. I have a question, and see if there are others. So this slide 7 is to fund what?
Yeah. So basically, it's really, when I've been having the discussion, I've been looking at it from 3 ways, right? We have 3 big needs that are coming forward. We have the need for permanent year-round low barrier shelter. We have the need for emergency cold weather shelter. And then we have the pilot site. Those are the 3 really big discussions that we've all talked about. Well, where are we going to get the funding for that? Where are we going to get the funding for that? I'm also thinking of it from a more holistic approach as well, because really all aspects of this need funding, right? Like the complex behavioral health work needs funding. All of this stuff does. So, but when I frame the conversations with the different entities that Anna and I have been meeting with, that's the framing that I start with, is those 3 examples, but also broadening it.
Okay, great, thanks. And I would just ask that the complex behavioral work hopefully not get pushed into homelessness, because I would really like to participate in that work based on my background and interests. Thank you for the presentation, it's very comprehensive. Any other questions for Felix? None right now. We can, that'll go up on the committee page, but we can also make sure that the presentation is circulated to members so you all have it. All right. Next on the agenda is assembly member discussion on pending business or updates from committees. We've always just done this kind of round the table, so I think we'll go ahead and do that. Actually, I'm going to start on the phone with you, Felix. Do you have any other updates you'd like to give on work or pending business?
Yeah, sure. So outside of homelessness work, you also introduced on the agenda the body-worn camera standards ordinance, transparency ordinance, whatever you want to frame it as. And I'm looking forward to the debate on that, the discussion on that. I know there's a work session planned. Aside from that, there's also a language access ordinance that some of us are working on. That is a key area that, especially in the equity space, I think there's a lot of good that we can do in that language access space. Beyond that, I am excited to attend my first AML conference as the official liaison. It's going to be happening, and I invite other of my colleagues to attend if you would so like. It's happening August 9th through the 11th at Homer. It's their 2023 Summer Legislative Conference. And then also, I just saw, just as a FYI, AML and AFN are putting together another Alaska Infrastructure and Development Symposium as a follow-up to the symposium that Senator Murkowski did a couple years ago. And that's going to be September 25th through 27th at Captain Cook. So hopefully folks are on the AML newsletter. I know a lot of folks are interested in infrastructure issues, so might be something you want to find. Thanks.
Great, thanks. All right, we'll go over to George next if you have any updates.
Not at the time, thank you.
Great, thanks, George. Cameron?
Yeah, just two updates. There's a work group that's formed on developing the process around Prop 14, and so that just met once, and there's work that's begun on that. That has there's a long road ahead for there, and but that's something that we're hoping to develop. We're hoping to bring on a contractor that can help us to do that work, and also to create a pretty robust communication system, both to communicate both to the assembly and to the community in terms of how that work works and fully. And then the second one is the work on the naming ordinance, which will be before us at our next meeting. There has I've been trying to work with a number of community groups on trying to inform that process. This summer has been challenging to get folks to meet, but there's just an email that came out today. I think we're going to try to connect next week to see where we are with that. My hope is that we can have it ready for the meeting, in the next meeting. But there is a possibility, just because of the difficulty of trying to get community members together to help inform, if we may have to push it a little bit further. Thanks.
Great, thanks. And this is just a gentle reminder that the meetings of the 25th and now August 8th are already getting very full.
So it may actually help. If we push it.
Thank you.
And Zach.
Nothing at this time.
Great, thank you. Karen?
So I need a little clarification. Can I talk about a project that I'm working on with the board?
Absolutely, because this is an open and notice meeting. It's one of the ways to do that.
Excellent. So Anna and Felix and Jennifer and I have been working on manufactured home stabilization, trying to look at ways that we can keep manufactured homes open and available. And we met with the Manufactured Home Association yesterday. They made it very clear that they are affordable housing. They feel like they have not maybe got as big a piece of the pie in help with the parks, and they feel like they have spaces that are available. I'm not sure why they need us to reach out, but they were wondering why no one's reached out to them. They have places they could put mobile homes, most of the parks. Glenn Cairns, he said he has 40 slots and he has 40 acres. And so anyway, so that's something maybe to look to in the future. More to come on that. I met with Visit Anchorage yesterday, and I had some technical difficulties and I couldn't ask the question because my mic didn't work, but they were talking about having meetings about sales tax in Anchorage, and that sales tax was steaming along, and they were just solidifying what tourism would look like in it. Would you add more tax to bed tax? And anyway, I just don't know who's meeting on sales tax. I had nothing to add to that, so hopefully if it's coming along, we'll find out about that. I've been meeting with Donna Mears about Tudor Muldoon traffic calming. We had $6 million for that project that was vetoed by the governor a year ago. And so we're continuing to work on that. We do have our new trail on the opposite side of the south side of Tudor Road that is open. And there's a ribbon cutting on July 26th at 4 p.m. We're going to meet at the Botanical Gardens area. So either bike in or come over. It's lovely.
Thanks, Karen. Two things to pass on around manufactured homes. HUD has an office of manufactured housing programs. And then this fall, there should be an $85 million notice of funding opportunity specifically targeting the development of manufactured homes and the stabilization of them. So you might want to look into those. Cameron.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on your question about sales tax. Is there a group currently, is there people in the assembly working on sales tax?
I believe there are some community groups working on a sales tax, and then some members have been discussing with the community groups. But I don't believe there's a concerted group of members working on a sales tax. I'm one of those members.
Do you want me to address that?
Do you have something as well? Go ahead.
Yes, Randy and Felix and myself have been working on that with AEC with Bill. So.
Okay, so there are a couple efforts going on.
There are.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
I don't really have anything to speak about that yet.
Yeah, so I would just share that that's one of the real benefits of this meeting, and when you do have something to share, updates or progress or that sort of thing, it'd be really, really helpful to have that to the degree that you want and can share that.
I need to follow up with Felix actually offline about that because one of us needs to work on a working group.
Okay, great. Kevin?
Karen, so fantastic. Very interested in the work that you're doing as far as modular homes and non-traditional, because a lot of the idea around what mobile homes were completely changed. One of the issues we discovered at Forest Park, and other research I've done, is there one has to be a willingness to move for other parks, and two, there has to be an ability, because a lot of these units were built in the 60s and they're not structurally sound to even move, which is actually an alarming majority of the older ones that have been sitting there since the 60s and 70s. Like if you try them, they're just going to crumble. So what I would encourage you to look at, one of the things we discovered is called an ROC. It's a residential owned community. It can get funded through a rural block grant program. And essentially what it does is it allows either the creation of a new one or purchasing of the existing that allows the residents who live there to form an organization. And they work with that organization, negotiate the contract, and offer private equity financing for them to actually buy the park. And they get no equity, and there's never any equity stripped out of the land, which means the price of the land stays stable at the time they buy it. It never goes up. It's just your portion. You buy in, you get a share, you get a voting right. You run it like an HOA. Imagine a condo association where the value of it never goes up because it's secured at the time of financing. So, and you can't pull equity out. You pay $100 or $200 to get in, and you go out and you leave. And it's a really amazing program because it means that the inflation rate on these programs is less than 1%. Even through everything we said, the rate of rent increase is usually limited to utilities. So look at the ROC, resident-owned communities, and what they can do to really help trailer park residents. It allows for infrastructure improvements, it allows for replacements, upgrading units. It's a really amazing program. And I'm surprised that we up here haven't learned about it yet, considering the amount of trailer parks we have available.
So Anna had the ROC on the radar, and we brought it up yesterday, and it was like, they don't want to sell their parks.
Well, you can start new ones, but here's a great thing. You can identify land that's zoned, R5 land that's zoned for it, and then you can go in and say, listen, you may not want to sell it, but there's nothing that procures from saying, let's establish our own, and then roll in the cost of a new trailer, and then someone gets a new house, and they get everything that they want. Maybe, and so I realize it would require them to move, but right now, do you continue to exist in a place that's dilapidating, falling apart, and is a health and life safety, or do you say, I have another option? This is a fantastic option for people who have a right to live in a nice place.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll provide an update that's connected to some of your work in a minute. Do you have any other updates beyond? Okay, no other updates, Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in the sales tax conversation and to see what you all bring forward. Things that I'm working on, as Felix mentioned, along with George, we're working on the body worn camera policy ordinance. I have the raised crosswalk ordinance that is still kind of slowly moving forward. We've hit our own raised crosswalks, so to speak, with some folks in PME who maybe have concerns. Engineers have concerns. I'll leave it at that. Let's see what else. We're working on an S1 version for the bike equity ordinance that we heard testimony on last night. We're going to incorporate some of the feedback that we got in the work session, so that's why we moved to postpone again. I'm working on an ordinance that would require assembly confirmation of the chief medical officer. I think that may have to be, after more talk with council, sort of a two-step process. One is there are some sort of these kind of executive roles that maybe could use a little bit more defining and refining in code. And it also may be the case that in order to require some of the confirmation of the chief medical officer, which is sort of nebulous in code right now, that may be something that we need to put on the ballot before voters, and so we're exploring that option. And then I got a couple 2040 land use things going on, or I should say Title 21 things. One is potentially a process where individual property owners, creating a process where individual property owners could apply for a rezoning to a more flexible zone within their 2040 land use designation. And then I'm also working on an alternate approach to making Kevin's rezoning. And we're having a work session on that tomorrow, so I'm really excited to see what you guys bring forward on that. I know it's been much talked about. And after seeing Kevin's town hall in Eagle River, I think we're actually on similar tracks, so it may or may not be something that I bring forward, but yeah, that's what I got going on.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm glad you mentioned that. We only have 2 members on that, and so if you would like to have a discussion about that, we could do that within the OMA parameters. For me, I'm working on the use table for manufactured homes, opening it up to all residential zones, because right now it is limited, and I don't understand why, when it's an affordable form of housing. So that is one thing I am working on. Obviously the residential zoning, and I have been doing a little bit of work on sales tax as well. Other than that, that is it for me. I wanted to provide the update. Kevin has graciously agreed to be the primary on AMATS with Daniel, and I've moved into the alternate position. So, Kevin, your updates?
Yeah, obviously, lots of things going on with zoning and land use. That's my passion. In fact, I want to put things in perspective how geeky I am, right? Because I have my Title 21 and my land use plans I carry around, and I have flashcards on every zoning district that I sit here and make my life really with all the notes on what it is, because it's so complicated. You have to say, well, if you change this, wait a second, because then in this land use you run afoul over here. And I literally had to create flashcards, and that's when I went to Hawaii. I literally sat there and sat next to the pool studying flashcards on land zoning. So that's how big of a nerd I am. Never thought I'd be that guy. But anyway, so it's been fun, and it's been a very passionate discussion. So as we go through this, here's something. There's a new ball I want to pick up and carry, and I'm hoping maybe you guys are doing this. We've heard a million times that the problem is not just land use, but it's infrastructure, and the cost of those infrastructure improvements being put on the developer. But these are city utilities, and if the developer doesn't do it right, the city still has to fix them, and they're stuck with that bill, right? So the city should be involved in the get-go when it goes in. And it shouldn't be up to the developer who may be looking to cut corners to do it. What amazed me is we sat here about 2 weeks ago with Solid Waste Services that has a trust fund or has a fund that they're pulling. And they got millions of dollars that they are investing so that we can, in 50 years in the future, plan to reinvest or so we can replace the landfill. But they're not the only fund like that. Do you remember where they said they were investing a bunch of their money? In infrastructure bonds in other cities. And that blew my mind that we are taking Solid Waste Services investment money and we're willing to invest in other communities to build out their infrastructure, but we're not doing it here. And that doesn't make sense. I would like to work with some people on the assembly on, I don't know how that works, but if we give direction that our trash, which is I think is kind of like a utility, should be reinvesting and forming some sort of utility bonding agency that we can go in and do these to a municipal standard up front, take the price off the developer, and then aggregate it over a period of 25, 30 years, because they don't need the money for 50, right? And just pay it back to an aggregate property tax and advertised at a 3 or 4% interest. They said they were only looking for a 2.5% return on their money. We can do 4 or 5%, cut the market, double their investment ROI, and fund our own infrastructure over a period of like 25, 30 years. And so I don't know how we do that, but to me, as an investor, as a business owner, this is like a no-brainer. And so I'm just sitting here like with this big thing, like, and now I don't know where to go with it. So maybe you guys can help me.
Thanks, Kevin. I'd be happy to work with you. There's some things around social impact bonding. There's a stormwater utility that could also help solve part of those problems. And then there's maybe the issue of the RCA. So Yes, George?
And I was going to also add on to that some jurisdictions have done master reviews of areas. So essentially, you're doing site reviews and you're getting into infrastructure stuff. So there are good case studies around the country with municipalities who have utilized some tools to redevelop and to open it up in those ways. So I think our committee is probably a good place that some of those conversations will come to as well. Yeah.
Did I hear a volunteer?
Yes.
Awesome.
You got a couple.
Secret handshake time.
All right, thanks Kevin, thanks George. Anything else on updates? Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, and just on that note, going back to the Community Economic Development Committee, at our last meeting, we also started to talk about the vacant and abandoned properties list in the community. The amount of those properties, we just kind of high leveled it, but over the next few meetings, I hope that we'll have more information and really looking at how we have units of housing available through redeveloping vacant and abandoned properties. And I know that comes alongside, I just got a call from, I think Representative Galvin's office is working on, some folks working on that in the House. And I know Senator Dunbar is working on some additional tools for blighted properties, which could come alongside municipalities to give us some more tools. So that's exciting from our committee. And I'll mention one additional item that I haven't begun working in terms of a legislative direction yet, but I've begun to have conversations with various stakeholders around how we improve safety for public transportation. Specifically, the first wave for me is a conversation about improving safety and protections for employees, our bus operators. Through the pandemic, there's been an uptick of assaults on buses, not only across individuals, but the operators themselves. So I've had conversations preliminarily with the Teamsters, the bargaining units, even the municipal attorney's office. And so I'm waiting for some feedback for some kind of what we can do, but there's something there that I think is going to be really important, help to boost morale, but also help to provide some protections as we start to shift the way we see public transportation in the community to create a sense of trust around it. So that's something that as legislative action comes forward, I'll be looking for folks to work with me. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Daniel?
Thank you. I forgot to mention one thing, our triplex fourplex ordinance that Kevin and Randy and I have been working on. We're making really good progress. It looks like we're going to be bringing forward two ordinances, one pertaining to Title 21, land use, and then the other Title 23, building code. And I think that Title 21 piece is nearing completion. Allie's been doing a rock star job of helping us do a lot of research and convening these, and Claire as well.
I just watched.
Convening these, I mean, honestly, it's been really helpful to have Allie on the team and keep all of our ducks in a row, because we all have these thoughts that are scattered, and she's like distilling them, and we have a path forward. So yeah, I think the Title 21 piece will be hopefully introduced pretty soon. The whole goal is to make it easier to build triplex and fourplex, treat them more along the lines of how easy it would be to build a single family home or a duplex. The Title 23 conversation is ongoing. We have another working group scheduled pretty soon. And so yeah, I'm excited to bring that before you guys.
Thanks, Daniel. I forgot one as well. George reminded me, I've been working with People Mover to give buses the right of way. They do not currently have the right of way for traffic in Anchorage. So it's one of the ways to look at maybe making our public transportation more efficient, just giving them the right of way. So, and I'm working on that by myself, so if anyone wants to jump on, you're welcome to join me. Okay, George, thanks. All right, any other updates before we turn on to the last item on our agenda?
I'm happy to be on that.
Okay, great. All right, with that, Claire, CIB conversation about a work session around the 120-day letter.
First off, I want to say what an honor it is to work with all of you. This body is so amazing. And as a member of this community, I'm just so excited about the work that you all are doing. I feel like you're taking us in a really exciting direction. It's neat to look back at the work plan you created last year and just see how many things you tick off, and things like the free fourplex, it seemed like would be years out, is now coming. So it's so exciting. So I just have a really brief update on another item from your work plan, the capital improvement plan, capital improvement budget, and the bond. It's really about the bonds, but the whole process. So as you recall, the last election, it was down to the wire in January, dealing with bond counsel and lawyers to figure out what was going to be the works on the bond. And so Chair Constant really wanted to make this a priority to look at that schedule and change it for the next year to make it, to be able to get assembly input earlier in the year so that it's not down to the wire. So he assigned Desiree and Dee and I to look into this, and as you recall, it seems like a year ago now, there was a presentation probably in April or May, I think, when the new members came on, about how the schedule worked, how that whole process worked to get it from the capital improvement projects list, which is a more long-term list, to the capital improvement bond, which is why are they all called the same thing? The capital improvement budget, which is for the 1 year outlook, and then the bond, which is specific to what goes on the elections for the bond. So you reviewed that, and then we looked at it and found a couple of choke points that we think we could move the process up earlier. So right now, when you have your 2 budget work sessions in October, the CIP bond is like the second half of the second day, and you all are tired and it doesn't get much attention. And so we are going to do a work session for the CIP in September, when the administration issues a 120-day memo. It's required in the code, and that's kind of the big picture to let you know what is coming when they're going to give you the details in October. So we're going to add a work session probably around September 8th, and this will allow you to go more in depth on the plan and budgets and have more time to mull it over. And we think by having more of it in the news, because what happens is community members are working on little projects, and then they're like, oh, assembly member, can you drop my project into the park bond? And then by then it's too late. So if we have it announced earlier in the year, hopefully we'll hear from more community members on their needs. And then
And this is Dee. Can I add one thing?
Yes, please do. I'm reading my notes to see what else I have to say.
Okay. This memo is due September 1st, and it's a couple-page document, but behind that is undoubtedly an entire notebook of information that OMB puts together, and it's all the projects and the cost, and it's a plethora of value to all of you. It's not that those projects are really decided upon later on. They have a whole notebook, and I know Desiree is going to go up and talk to Marilyn. OMB, I think, is one of the best departments. They're more than willing to share this information. And again, there's undoubtedly a notebook of information about the bonds, the projects. So by that work session, we need to make sure you have copies of that or access to it online. You should know a tremendous amount of where the administration is going. That conversation should not happen late October.
Yeah.
And that's what happened last year, was that there were amendments to whichever CIB. Chris tried to make amendments in November, December, when he realized they were necessary, way too late in the process if you're going to put bonds up in January. So very, very, very important work session.
For that work session, can we make sure we get a calendar from the clerk working back? Because there's a clerk's timing in terms of notice and other pieces to that, which was really crucial in how we ended up being able to solve the issue that came up. So I think it's important that we're aware of that calendar and when we want to get those things before us, because the amendments were coming in to where there wasn't a time for some notice pieces and some other things.
Yeah. Okay.
And Meg, I think that we actually did that in that work session, but let's call that information that we did that whole thing, so it's readily available, and we'll put that together for you.
Then 2 other things in that process. There will be another work session on the topic in late May, late April, early May, and that will allow some post-election analysis of the bonds, of what didn't pass, to then think about adding it to the next bond, looking at the legislative session to see what passed, and just having it come up a couple more times in the year so it's not this last minute rush. And then finally, a lot of you have identified that the community councils have a problem with the process and the survey they take. We look back and quite a few community councils didn't even take the survey this year. So Legislative Service is committed to take a more active role in that next spring and work with you members to remind the community councils that you work with that they need to do it. And actually, you can start right now and let them know, because I imagine some community councils I go to, they work on it throughout the year, and then some of them seem to not know that it exists. And so if they're working on it throughout the year, then when the survey comes issued in May, they've already passed resolutions and have that and can do that. And so we've committed to help remind you when those are out, and so you can engage them. And I believe that is all we have right now.
Great. Karen. You know, someone asked you before, one of the big problems is stuff keeps getting dumped on our list that we say delete, this is not relevant to our area, and then it shows up again the next year. And so I think that gets frustrating because it feels like you're not being heard.
Yeah. We didn't have a big solution to that because that's really the administration side, but we did think by advertising it more, and having better communications directly from the community councils to the members, that maybe that you can also be keeping an eye on those lists better and bring stuff of your own, or delete, remove stuff once you get it from the administration side.
Thanks. I think part of it is demystifying what happens once community councils submit their list, and then what goes, how does the administration decide to prioritize what is there? And I know some of it's, project planning and other things. We need to remember each list goes in and it's part of a 5-year plan. So, but that we need to demystify it. Any other questions? Thanks for the work on that. That's really great. All right. Audience participation. Anyone here want to participate? Anyone at all? All right, with that, we will be adjourned. Go enjoy the sunny weather.
Just in time for 8 minutes.